You're listening to This Naked Mind with Annie Grace.
Hi, this is Annie Grace, and welcome to This Naked Mind podcast. And I'm here with Amy. Hi, Amy. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Annie?
I'm good. So good to see you.
I am so excited about today. And I just wanted to thank you so much for the last 3 years.
Oh, that's so special.
Yeah, it's been great. It really has. And I didn't think I'd get emotional already. Your book meant a lot to me, and it has changed my life, and it's changed my husband's life and my kids, and I'm sure future generations. So thank you.
Oh, that's so amazing. All right. Well, let's take it all the way back to the backstory to that. So let's go back to the beginning. Where did your journey start?
Well, my story, I want to say, is a story about anxiety, fear, and I'm not enough. And I grew up, my life is pretty typical. I grew up in the cornfields of central Illinois. I grew up in a very loving Christian home. Both my parents are still married to this day. I'm the oldest of 4, and there's about a 5-year age difference between me and my next sibling. And so that put me in that position of being the oldest, being the big sister. I held a lot of responsibility. Let's make sure that everything that you do, that you don't get in trouble, that you just, you're expected to be this good, obedient child. And being that firstborn, I took this very seriously. I did. I want to say that the anxiety started somewhere in really started when I was probably in about 4th or 5th grade. And I think the reason I had so much anxiety and fear is because my dad worked for the airlines industry. I grew up in central Illinois, and that's the headquarters of Caterpillar. And there was always strikes or fear of strikes. My dad worked for a union person. And so I always had this fear that what if something happened to my dad's job? My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She babysat. But again, there was always that fear of, oh my gosh, something could happen. What am I going to do? And I can remember from a very young age, I, on my own, went to school and volunteered to work in the cafeteria so that I could make sure that I had a free meal so that my younger siblings would have food. I mean, this is and my parents didn't ask me to do that, but I just had this expectation of myself that I had to help out. And I also, around that same time, I started, and I didn't realize this until I was an adult, that this was a real problem. I started pulling my hair out. And so I had to wear a bandana to school. So, okay, add that into kids are mean. And I've got this, clearly have this issue, an OCD issue, and that it just kind of built. It built over time. So fast forward to high school.
All right. I actually have a question on, sorry to interrupt, but I'm curious, like, internalizing that about your parents' job, did that come from conversations you can remember, or observations?
I think it was conversations, because I was the oldest. I also think it was from the news. I mean, when we would turn on the news, and this is in the 70s. So, you had gas lines, and you had, I remember being in line in our vehicle, hoping we would get through the gas line to get gasoline, and just other things that happened also. Like, I do remember one time when my dad was on strike, and I can remember powdered milk and those types of things. And we didn't go without. And I mean, we never, I don't remember ever, being hungry or anything like that. And my parents were amazing. I mean, one Christmas, there were just presents for us kids. And I remember just being like, oh, wow, like a feeling bad that my parents didn't have a present. and taking my siblings and going, let's go make mom and dad these presents. And we like made them just little, it was like cardboard, little cards or something like that. And so I think it was maybe a combination of that. So yeah. So I think it was probably a combination of all those things. So fast forward, I'm a 15-year-old. I'm now in high school, and I'm in love. I'm obsessed with this boy, and I have my first drink in his vehicle in the middle of a cornfield somewhere. He was this very popular guy, and I remember having that drink, and I didn't have that drink feeling like I've heard others describe, like it was just this, oh, I felt great and everything. For me, it just made me feel comfortable. It just was like, oh, now I can talk with him. And I always had this feeling of not enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not good enough. And here I am in this car with this most popular guy who ended up being a long-term boyfriend. Amazing guy, amazing family. But I still, in the back of my mind, never felt like I was good enough. That relationship ended. He ended off going off to college. And back then we didn't have, telephones and social media where we could stay connected. And I felt alone and started dating my first husband, who, when I started dating him, I thought was a lot of fun and everything. And the high school experience was drinking, but then in college, it really turned into binge drinking, but I still did okay in school. I graduated. I put myself through college. I worked a couple of jobs, but drinking, when you went out and drank, it was to get drunk. I mean, that was what you did when you would go out. And this boyfriend and we drank a lot. We work hard. We play hard. We ended up getting married, and I really should have known that this was not going to end well. I remember he already had a drinking problem when we got married. And at that time, my drinking was just for partying. And so I got a job. I started working. I got another job. I was like, okay, I'll work during the day. I have nothing to do. I've graduated from college. I'll work in the evening. So I was working all the time. And our relationship just kind of fell apart. I wanted to get into counseling. He wouldn't go, and he would not do that. And his family was very different from mine. His family was very much the drinking culture. His dad would have been deemed he was a self-professed alcoholic, but he would fall off the wagon. He would, it was just accepted. I could go there. Even when I was under 21, I could drink. So it was doomed. We ended up, infidelity happened. I remember one morning I was trying to lose weight and be healthy, and I got up 5 a.m. in the morning and went to get in his vehicle to go to the gym. And I went to move the seat up, and I could hear the beer cans crushing underneath the seat. And I pulled out. I was so upset, and I pulled out all this beer because at that time, again, I only drank for fun and recreation. And I knew that he was in trouble. And we ended up getting divorced. And I met Matt, my husband now. And it was amazing. But again, I still had that I'm not good enough in my head. I'm not good enough. And I was introduced to drinking like real adults in my mind. This is how we behave. Matt, when we started dating, it was like he just would have a drink or two every night. We would go out again. I only really drank on the weekends, or I worked for a radio station at the time. So we would have events that we would go to, remotes and things like that at bars. And so you drink then, but it still was not, it wasn't like an everyday thing. And there were times where, yeah, we were going to go out and we were going to party and we were going to have a good time. But again, it was not something that I was abusing, I think, in my own mind, even though when I did go out and binge drink that was abusing it. And so Matt and I dated. We ended up getting married. And one of the things I connect with you, Annie, is how you said in your book, how you and your husband were like, we want to remember this day. And I can remember Matt and I, we were talking and we're like, you know what? We want to remember this day. And so we really told each other, we're not going to get drunk. We'll have a drink. We'll sip. And I remember we would take a sip, put the drink down, and we had friends who were literally following us around, finishing our drinks for us. And so we had a wonderful, we got married. I'm 5 years older than Matt. And so I wanted to start a family. And he was like, okay. So we end up within probably about 3 or 4 months, ended up getting pregnant with our first son. So again, I'm not drinking, to excess. I'm not drinking really when I'm pregnant, except my doctor did tell me I could have a glass of wine every week and it wouldn't be a problem. I didn't do that, but I did reward myself with a glass of wine every month, which I look back and I'm like, it's neither here nor there. And as we progressed and I had my son and I changed jobs somewhere, right after we were married, and we bought a home and everything, again, it was like I would have a drink or two on like Friday night. And I had rules too. I was very much a controller already. If I drank on Friday night, I would not drink on Saturday. That was just the way I was already. So if we had something on Saturday night, I would be like, oh, well, not on Friday night. And I also was very cognizant of the fact that I am a mom and I am in charge of this child and I have to stay in control. So as we would fast forward through life, if we would go out, like we would have times where we would go out and take the kids to grandma and grandpa's for the weekend, that's when mom would let her hair down and have a great time. And, the last time that I binge drank, and I shouldn't say the last time, but one of the last times was when Luke was about 2 or 3 years old. And I drank so much that I got so sick that Matt had to call somebody to help him. And I look back on it, and again, I refer to your book, and I'm like, thank heavens that I could throw up because I would have died. And I knew that weekend, because it was a 2-day hangover, and I can remember going, you have this little boy who keeps coming up and going, Mommy, what's wrong? Why are you sick? And I'm thinking, why are you doing this? You're wasting this time. So I vowed I was not going to be like that anymore. And I really held true to that for years. And then we adopted our daughter. And again, things were pretty normal, except by this point, I'll go back just a little bit. I was having some difficulties, again, still with anxiety. And I ended up getting on and I was depressed because of all these changes that had happened. So I went ahead and they put me on a depressant, antidepressant, when Luke was probably around 2. And so I stayed on that. I had my meds adjusted throughout life, but we adopted our daughter. And there was a point where I wanted so badly to be at home with my daughter. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And we were able to figure that out. So I stayed at home, but now I'm at home and now I'm feeling just as lost as I was when I was working. I wanted to be at home with her when I was working, and then I wanted to be the opposite. Just this complete comparison game happening. And again, that anxiety and the fear, and that I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough when I'm working and being a mom, working outside of the home. And I'm at home, inside the home, and I'm not good enough. I'm not doing a good enough job here. And so there was this constant story that I was telling myself all the time. And it just over time, it just built and built. And the kids are getting older. And I finally there was just a point where it was time where I guess I was going to go back to work. Maggie was going into preschool. And so Matt said, you know what? You need to get back out in the workforce. And I'm like, okay, what kind of job am I going to get? Because he travels all the time. So I have to have a very flexible job. And he's like, you can go work for my parents. Be great. You can go do marketing. You can take care of the kids. You'll just go to work when the kids are at school. So that's what I did. That was really hard to go and work for my in-laws. And I love my in-laws. My in-laws are absolutely the most amazing people in the world. They're very generous. But again, I'm telling myself this story in my head. And at this time, the anxiety is I still have it. But my drinking's starting to increase. So instead of it just being the Friday nights, it was turning into Friday and Saturdays. You have a disagreement, like I remember distinctly going to my parents, and I don't even remember what happened, but I just remember being in the car thinking, and this is in my mid-40s, thinking to myself, I get home, I get to have a glass of wine or two. It'll take this away. I know it will. And that opened it up. It opened it up to I'm just going to have a drink when I'm not feeling the way I should feel. And I didn't realize this, but this is happening and I'm drinking, and then the anxiety is getting more and more. And I'm trying to hold everything together, and I'm trying to control things, and I'm trying to make my house look perfect, and I'm trying to put on this perfect facade, and I just can't do it anymore. And somewhere around, I think my son was in junior high or going into high school, and I remember trying to go into work, and I could not go into work. And I was crying, and I was really hysterical, actually. And I called my husband. I go, I can't go to work. I don't know what to do. And so he was like, don't go to work today. We're going to get you a counselor or therapy. And so I went into that. I went to a therapist, and that helped a lot. But the one thing the therapist never asked me was about my drinking. I've talked to her about it since then. And she's like, I didn't fit the bill. I didn't fit it. And I even told her, I go, it's not your fault. And I go, I probably am pretty sure I would have lied. So, I just, it brought an awareness to her that she even said, I've got to change how I approach this. So anyways, still trying to keep the perfect life. We're active in our church. I'm trying to have this active prayer life. I've got my kids in the activities. I'm singing in the choir. However, it's really hard to sing in the choir when you're hungover, but I learned how to do it. But I just remember feeling completely out of alignment in my life, and it got worse. It just kept getting worse. The longer I was in this and trying to control everything, and then the more I wanted to drink. And so finally, I can't believe it took this long, because I think I was stuck for really about 7 years. Cognitive dissonance was so bad. It just was so bad. It was like on Friday and Saturday nights, we were living this 5 o'clock somewhere lifestyle. And then on Sunday morning, I was trying to get myself into this, okay, now here we are in this compartment of our life. Here we are, the churchgoers. And Matt and I also were, we were involved in small group, but our small group had to be the small group that drank. So everything it didn't make sense for so long. And so I remember we went into a group setting where the program at our church was called Rooted, and it was a 12-week program, and we're supposed to be developing, these different rhythms of life. And it was great. It was absolutely wonderful. But there was a section on strongholds. And I can remember being in with this group of women, because they divided us up for that practice. And we were getting closer to my turn, and I was going to tell them about my drinking, and it got to me, and I'm like, I don't even remember what I said. but I didn't talk about alcohol because the shame, I had so much shame around it and I just couldn't do it. And that was probably in 2018 or so, 2019, and still wasn't ready to give it up. Didn't know how. And I want to say, Annie, one of the things that I want people to know is that I don't consider drinking a sin by any means. But what I had done is I had elevated drinking to this point of being an idol in my life. It was what I thought about all the time. It was this obsession it had become in my life. And I didn't, by any standards, I did not drink like what society tells us is an alcoholic. In my mind, I just was like a couple drinks here, and then it became to pretty much about a good 5 days to 6 days a week, because I was like, I never let go of one day. I just had to keep that control. But there were days where, it happened, weeks where I drank every night. And I finally decided in 2020, January of 2020, that I had to turn things around. And I decided that I wanted to get more connected with my faith. So I decided to start reading the Bible. I was going to read the Bible in a year. And I started this. Now I'm still drinking. This has not changed anything. There was a night, our son was about ready to go back to college, and we decided to watch a movie with him. And I'm all excited. So I go and I get my wine and we're drinking and everything. And I didn't black out, but I called it a brownout, because I was coming and going in and out of it. And I can just remember there were parts of it where I was crying. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night and going, I don't want to be this mom. I don't want to drink with my kids. And my son wasn't drinking with us, but I just see that was where we were headed. And I'm like, I don't want to be that person. I kept having these visions back to my first husband's family, where all we did was sit around and drink. And I'm like, I don't want that. I want a real relationship with my kids. That was a point where it was like, okay, things have got to change. And it didn't change yet, but then we come to the pandemic, and our son is back home for an extended period because they extended out their spring break. And we get the call saying, you got to come back up to the school, get all of his stuff. We're closing the university. The state's going into lockdown. The country's going into lockdown. And we get his stuff. We're coming home. They make the official, the governor says we're closing the state. So we go to the grocery store and we go to the liquor store and we buy enough alcohol for 6 weeks, because we need to have alcohol to survive the pandemic, because we were told you needed to go to the liquor store. We didn't go on our spring break trip that we had planned. And for some reason in there, I decided that first weekend going into the pandemic, I think I might have had 1 glass of wine, but I didn't even really drink that weekend. But on that Tuesday night in spring break, on March 24th, we decided to have a social distance party with our neighbors out on the patio or on the driveway. I'm drinking no more than I normally did, but I have my tumbler. My kids come out about, 7 o'clock and ask, are we going to do anything for dinner? And Matt and I are like, oh, just go make a pizza. And I remember having almost like this out of body experience going, we're going into the pandemic. Our kids are probably scared. And you just sat there and told them to make a pizza so you can sit here and drink this wine. And I just was like, are you kidding me? And so I ended up finishing that drink. I woke up in the middle of the night like I had so many nights before. And let me also say that I wasn't really sleeping anymore at this point of my drinking. It was more like naps. And I woke up at 3 a.m. and I was like, this is insane. And I had I think a real God moment where I was like, help me. And I had done this before, but I picked up my phone in the middle of the night and I'm scrolling and I found a 21-day reset. And I said, okay, I'm going to fix this. I signed up and I'm going to fix my drinking. I'm going to be able to go back to moderation. And I signed up for this group. And I really feel like it was a God moment. The gal who led the group ended up introducing me to your book. I remember I actually have pictures of me, pictures of your books in my car. I'm like, okay, we're going to read this book. But there was something in me at that point that finally said, okay, God, if you're going to help me get to this point, I'm going to do whatever I'm led to do, and she told me to get this book and read this book. So I'm getting this book and I'm reading your book, and I would read your book every night. And I think in the beginning you say, don't try to read this book all in one sitting. And I did. I just sat there and was like, okay, we're going to read it. And I remember all the emotions. And I remember sitting there and I'm not drinking and I'm making mocktails every single night, and I'm listening to Quit Lit, and I've found your podcast, and I'm doing all the things, and I'm on social media, and your team was doing lives, and I would tune into these lives, and I can just remember going, wow, I want to do that. I want to help people. And there's just this moment where I was like, I started to feel better. And I think, you're reading through the book, and there was a point where I was driving, and it was around day 14. And I can remember being in my vehicle, and it was a beautiful spring day. And the sun roof was open, and I'm feeling the warmth, and I'm seeing the blue skies, and I'm hearing the music, and I'm on this sensory overload, and I can just feel this well up of emotion that I haven't felt in forever. And it just came out, and I start crying, and I'm like laughing, and I'm shaking, and I get home and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling joy. I haven't felt joy in years, probably since we adopted my daughter and I had my son. And I just couldn't believe it. I was feeling great. And I walked in and I looked at my husband. I go, I don't think I'm going back. I don't know if I don't know if I ever want to drink again. And that was just absolutely amazing. And so I finished the 21 days. I finished out the month. I signed up for your alcohol experiment. And so I did the alcohol experiment. I went to one of your seminars, and it was like, here's, you can do the path, or you can do 100 days of lasting change. And I'm like, still at this point in my life, I was not enough. I could not afford stuff. I wasn't going to invest in myself that much. So I went ahead and did the 100 days of lasting change, and I kept going. And you said so many times, you're like, do the first. So I went on my first vacation and I didn't drink. And this was insane. And it was my birthday as well. And I just kept going and I kept going and I kept feeling better. And the further I got away from the alcohol, the more I just felt so good. And I didn't have to take my anxiety medication anymore. And it just got better. And then I went ahead and said, let's do the rest of the year. So I did the rest of the year. And that was hard. Holidays are hard, but I did it. I couldn't believe I did it. And we got to a point in there, it was like right before New Year's. And I'm listening because, the algorithm speaks to you now. And Matt's starting to he's trying moderation this whole time. He's trying moderation. And I left out a part of the story when I told him that I was going to do this. But during that time I was telling him I was going to do this, he confessed that he had been diagnosed with mild fatty liver disease, but he was still going to try to do moderation. And you had said in your book, you are not going to be able to make anybody change their drinking. And I just was like, okay, I cannot change his drinking, but I can support him and I can give him grace and I can give him compassion. And that's what I did. But came up, the algorithm's going through. And here comes a This Naked Mind advertisement. Join us for the live alcohol experiment. So I make sure that the volume is up. And he hears it, and it's a male voice. And he goes, wait a minute, I thought that was just chicks. I thought women only did this program. I said, no, go, absolutely not. He goes, well, let me see that. He signed up. He did the 30 days. His health got better. He had been suffering for our entire married life with irritable bowel syndrome. 2 weeks, it was gone. He's like, I don't think I'm going back. So here we are. We're almost to, this is 2021. I'm like, Matt, I want to sign up for coaches training. So I signed up. Almost didn't do it because, again, that voice in my head was saying, who do you think you are? On the phone call, you're in. What's holding you back? And I was like, nothing. I'm doing this. I'm going to do this. So I did it and went through the coaches training. Got my certification at the end of, I guess it was the end of the summer of 2021, and started my own business, which I'm like, no idea, like, what are you doing? I had no desire to do that, but fast forward now, and I'm working with another fellow coach, and I'm doing one-on-one coaching, and created a program called the Alcohol Free Spirit. And we talk about our faith, plus we put in the science of everything that I've learned through This Naked Mind. And I'm helping people. I'm doing, it goes all the way back to when I was a kid, and I wanting to help others, wanting to help my family. And then just coming all the way to here and going, all right, I want to help people get free from this, because there's so many lies that we've been told. It's just, that's where I'm at now. So I'm doing that. Now I'm on your show, on this podcast, which I think is amazing. My husband and I started our own podcast called the Alcohol Free Marriage Podcast, because we wanted to show people that you can live life without alcohol. And I always tell people I'm not anti-alcohol. I can drink whenever I want. I just don't want to drink. I just don't want to put that in my body anymore. But if I want to, I can. And it's been a roller coaster. And the other thing, which is exciting, is he and I, through our podcast, we met a couple of marriage coaches who live very close, who was amazing. They knew your story. Her husband had some issues with alcohol. And he goes, This Naked Mind? I'm like, yes. And it was amazing. It was like, he's like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And so Matt and I are now, we're actually in training to become marriage coaches as well. So the possibilities of what started 3 years ago, my life is just forever changed for the better.
Oh, that's just incredible, Amy. Wow.
So yeah, exciting. We're very happy. Not to say that there aren't things that happen that, I tell people, I go, I still have that fleeting thought every once in a while, but I know now exactly. I'm like, oh, that's just a thought. I mean, you taught me that at age almost 52, that I could question my thoughts. And I will tell you, one of the things in training, probably one of the first days during training, you told us to have curiosity. Mm-hmm. And I remember that. And I remember having also been told to write down your energy snacks. And I had to write down curiosity because of that. Somewhere back in probably my childhood, somebody probably said something like curiosity kills the cats. And I just remember going, why am I so opposed to curiosity? And it came back down to, I wasn't supposed to question my thoughts. And I really had to come to terms with that curiosity and saying, it's okay to be curious. It's okay to question everything. And so I want to just say again, thank you so much for writing your book. Thank you for the opportunity to come on here. And thank you for the big thing for me too, is that the grace and compassion I felt all along the way. And that's one of the things that I talk to my clients about. I'm not here to judge you at all. And that's what we say even on our podcast. This is a judgment-free zone. We are here to help, and it's not your fault. I think that's probably the biggest thing, again, that I learned that was probably the most freeing, is that it's not your fault.
I love that so much. Oh, that's just incredible, Amy. So let me ask you the final two questions. First of all, as a coach, where can people find you? Should they be interested in coaching?
Go to joyontheotherside.com. They can find everything. So,
and then if you were going to go back in time and, talk to the version of yourself who was struggling, and you were going to tell her what life is like now, what would you say?
We did a practice in coaches training that I remember, that we went back and talked to our younger self. And the younger self I thought I was going to talk to was like that little girl, but she was actually that probably 22, 23-year-old. And I just would tell her that all of this that you're going through right now is going to be used to tell a story. And your story is going to be that you overcame, that you got reconnected with yourself, that you got reconnected with God, and that you got reconnected with all of your senses, everything again. And you became a whole person.
Love that. It's beautiful. It's awesome. Well, that's so amazing. Thank you so much for coming on, Amy. It's been such a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you're ready to see how This Naked Mind can help you on your personal health and wellness journey and want to learn more, go to thisnakedmindpodcast.com to learn what your next best step is. Again, that's thisnakedmindpodcast.com. We have all of our free resources, programs, social links, and more available for you there. Plus, if you have your own naked life story to share, you can submit it there as well. Until next week, stay curious.